starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to Basic Blaque After Dark. I'm your host, Black Diamond, and tonight we're beginning a powerful three-part mental health series with none other than Dr. Carolyn Stephens. Dr. Stephens is a clinical mental health Christian therapist. She's a family support specialist and a fierce advocate for cultural diversity who dedicated her life to helping individuals and families heal. In part one, we are breaking the silence and understanding mental health. We're diving deep into the why so many in our invisible burden. This series is about healing and bringing truth to the surface because healing starts with honesty. Please welcome Dr. Stephens to Basic Blaque After Dark. Hello, Dr. Stephens. Great. I'm so glad that you were able to make it tonight. Thank you so much for being a part of this series because I think that the mental health and educating the community is very important. So I want you to define mental health, Dr. Stephens. When you hear the term mental health, what does it truly mean? And what do people often misunderstand about it?
Okay, and that's a really good question. So, mental health is health concerns, health care that focuses on any aspect of your mind. Okay, so we all should focus on our mental health. Now, of course, where misconceptions come in at is that people sometimes get the terms confused when you say mental health with mental illness, and that's sometimes
How
where
do you
people.
explain the difference?
So when you explain the difference, is that we all a part of it. So as human beings, we have our physical health. That's what most of us may go to the doctor for. Yeah, we have our physical health. And so there are things that we should do to maintain our physical health: rest, exercise, eating, sleeping, things like that. All right. Then we have our spiritual health or spiritual well-being. That looks different for everybody. For some people, that's praying, that's meditating, those things that we do to maintain the spiritual aspect of our life. Then we have our mental health, okay? And so there are things that we do to maintain the health of our mind. Now, when we go through certain traumatic events or we have things that we had not really dealt with, it can be, not all the time, but it can be or turn into a mental health problem or challenge, and that's where we have mental illness. That's where that comes in. So I think that sometimes the terms confused about mental, like somebody may say she has mental health. Well, we all have mental health, but it's one thing to say someone has a mental health challenge or they have a mental health illness. Typically, when you have a mental health illness, that means that you've been diagnosed with some type of a mental health challenge. So I hope that clears it up.
So it does greatly because so many people get it confused. So many people believe there's so many different myths and misconceptions about it. What are some of the most damaging myths about mental health or illness you've encountered in your practice?
Sure. So some of the most damaging things or ideologies or myths, I like when you use that term about mental health or mental health illness, is that um, there is something terribly wrong with you as a human being if you're having challenges with your mental health. And there is something that I always say, I use the language term. It's okay to not be okay when it comes to your mental health. Okay. And you want to see about yourself. So one myth is that there's something wrong with you there's something wrong with you as a whole person if you have some struggles or challenges or issues with your mental health. That is one myth. Another myth, depending upon culture, is some people believe that it is not a good thing to see a mental health professional with concern for your mental health maintenance. And so to that I would say, if you break your leg, you break your arm, you think nothing about going to the emergency room or seeing a doctor to help you with your broken leg, your broken arm. Sometimes in the area of mental health, there are things that are broken with us mentally or emotionally. So they have professionals such as myself that help people with that. So it's one of the myths that people have about, or two of the myths that people have about mental health.
So how do these myths keep people from seeking the help that they truly need?
Well, because people become ambivalent, because sometimes there isn't enough conversation about mental health and mental health issues or mental health illness. There's not enough conversation about it, which is why people like myself, who are advocates for mental health, we try to talk about mental health in a way that will normalize those conversations about mental health. So, and we all need to do that in your own circle or your own sphere of influence, whether you're a faith-based leader, whether you're a community advocate, a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, whatever your sphere of influence is, the people that you influence in some way, some form, you need to have healthy conversations about mental health that does not make people feel ambivalent about coming forward and saying, hey, I'm just not okay. Emotionally, I'm not okay. I'm not doing well. I will say this for those people who are watching, those who may watch the replay. You have some sphere of influence in your house, with your family, with your children, with your neighbors, and we need to start having those conversations with those people that we are close to. Like your children, having regular conversations about their emotional health, where they are, how are you doing, how are you doing?
You mentioned something a few minutes ago, word normalized. For some people, they've lived in situations where their life has just been lifing, and the way that they may perceive it is that's normal for them. The things that may be happening to them, around them, and they may consider that normal, where others may not consider that normal. Would that be a stigma and silence? Because I'm wondering, why do so many people continue to suffer in silence rather than reach out for support? And I'm wondering if it's because they're believing the same thing, that it's normal. This is normal. You may look at it one way, I may look at it another way. That me doing this or feeling this way or acting this way is normal. But to you as a professional, you may say that I could be suffering in silence. Why do some people suffer in silence rather than reach out for support?
They do that because of fear of judgment. They do that because of fear of judgment by their coworkers, their colleagues, their family. Maybe you come from a family. So certain cultures don't believe in getting help or seeking help for mental health issues. Certain cultures believe you pray, you meditate. they don't believe in that. And so if you're a person that comes forward in your family, your community, or your culture and say, I think that I want to seek out professional help for some of the issues or things that I'm experiencing, you may encounter some rejection. You may encounter some people who may judge you. And so that's the number one reason why people don't seek out professional help when it comes to our emotional or mental well-being, because they're in fear that they're going to be judged.
Do you believe that in communities of color that therapy is often stigmatized? You know, because I know at times, I know growing up, I would hear somebody would say, "Oh, this person is crazy," or no, you would hear something else like, I know back a little further, maybe a little bit before my time, because I'm not going to try to tell my age. Well, shoot, I don't care. I don't know my age. But they would say that the person had, they were senile. They would use that term instead of saying, giving it a terminology or a diagnosis. They would say they were senile. Do you believe that in communities of African American, or I'm not just going to say African American, communities of color, I would say it that way, that therapy is often stigmatized?
Yes, I do. I will say that over the recent years, uh, as we become more aware about mental health issues, some of those ideologies have changed, have progressed some, where people have now become a bit more accepting about mental health and mental health illnesses. And that's because we now talk about it more, and that's how we normalize those conversations, just to be able to have those conversations. So, but yes, even in 2025, in the African American community, we still have some ambivalence about people seeking out help for those kinds of issues. Very often, you would hear in the African American community, people would say, "Well, just pray about it, and you'll be all right." And I am certainly one in my own personal life that does adhere to prayer. I am a person that believes in prayer. But as a professional, I also know that prayer coupled along with working with a professional or working with a coach, a counselor, it can also help a person to navigate through those issues. But to your question, yes, there's still very much so some ambivalence about African Americans seeking out, help for their mental health issues. There are cultures, for example, in the Oriental culture, they are not very open to seeking out mental health. Uh, they're not very open to that. So, depend on your cultural upbringing and what you were raised, what you were taught. That may or may not make you ambivalent to seeking out professional help, because some people may feel, well, if I go to a doctor for something like this, and this is a term that I don't use, but I'll only use it in this sense because it's one that people are familiar with and people know it. If I go out and seek help, that means I'm crazy, or that means that other people will
Mhm.
think that I'm crazy, which is why
Let
I
me
say,
listen to this
mhm,
thought. Is it more so the community has accepted it more, or is it that it's the way the therapist may be speaking with the individual? Because, as you mentioned, you're also, well, I already said you were a powerhouse, but you also add Christianity to it. There's so many different types of therapists that offer services. Do you believe that the individual have to find the right fit for them, or that, I know therapy is not therapy because everybody is different in the way that they um, treat their clients, the way that they see their clients, the way that, or customers. I can stand maybe 10 therapists in one room and have a person that was diagnosed, and each therapist could agree to it, but the person may feel more comfortable with maybe therapist number 5 and not therapist number 6. Do you think it's because of maybe the values that they bring as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Therapists, each, every therapist has a different modality that they operate in. For example, I'm a licensed Christian counselor, as well as I practice community therapy, or what people would call secular therapy. But I'm a licensed therapist that practice Bible-based therapy as well. Um, then you have, which I'm really glad about this, but now you have more African American professional therapists uh,
Mhm.
that are available, and sometimes people want to have the opportunity to share their most private thoughts um, with someone who looks like them. You have
And what did you
some people are
go ahead?
gender biased. They want men to provide those services. So yes, indeed.
I recently spoke with someone, and they had said that they were in therapy, and I told them I was so proud of them for acknowledging that they needed supportive services, and they chose therapy. However, they mentioned that they stopped going to that therapist, and they mentioned they felt as though because that therapist was of a different race and didn't get them. What are some of the early signs that someone might be struggling with their mental health, or with struggling with maybe choosing a therapist?
Hmm. Okay. Well, some of the challenges with choosing a therapist. I mean, it's going to be just like choosing a medical doctor. You know,
Mm.
um, sometimes you won't know if it's a good fit until you actually try it. Because also you have personalities. There may be some therapists, depending upon their particular personality, that may not be a good fit for you as a person. It's just really because we're people and we relate or connect with different people based on that person's experience, based on that person's gender, based on that person's culture. We have a myriad of things that make us feel comfortable enough with a person to disclose a very private aspects about life. So sometimes
Well,
it's going to be a try. You're just going to try one person. It wasn't work, then you try somebody else. So sometimes it's just a
I
try.
did a little bit of research with some individuals on mental illness, or their mental health, whichever one they feel comfortable with saying. And I asked the question: is it that you stopped going to therapy because I'm gonna be upfront? I just came out and said it to them because they weren't telling you what you wanted to hear, or that you felt uncomfortable with the individual because of maybe sex or race or something. And they had to sit and they looked at me and they had to think. And I said, you don't have to answer the question, but what do you feel as though that could be the reason for your decision? And they were honest with themselves. They said yes. Some of them said yes. They were expecting that this therapist would tell them certain things. Do you think that's the reason why some people shy away from therapy?
I think that's the reason why some people shy away from therapists, pastors, teachers, trainers, coaches. I don't think it's just that they shy away from therapists. I think that sometimes, depending upon what a person's issues are, they may shy away from anyone who may be candid with them, because now you're talking about um, getting to some root causes, some underlying issues, and there's just some people who they just don't like that. But here's the thing I want to say about that: when you really want to heal, so that's when you're tired of feeling the way you've been feeling, operating the way you've been operating, getting the responses you have been getting from family, friends, relationships, or whatever. You're going to open up yourself to someone to be candid with you about what you're dealing with. But yes, to your
So,
question, I do think that there's some people, but I think that's just not with therapists. I think that's with a whole lot of other people.
so then how could we check in with ourselves or with our loved ones without judgment?
Well, checking in with ourselves. You know, even with being a therapist, everything is built on trust. You know, people come to me and stay with me because they learn how to trust me. So therapists have to build a relationship with a person. You just aren't providing a service. You're building a relationship with a person so that they give you the opportunity to come into their lives and talk to them about very private things in their lives. So I would say, to your question, that individual uh, has to make up in their mind, I need to trust somebody. And it's just a matter of who you're going to trust because they really want to get well. So I hope that answers your
And
question. Yeah,
building a rapport is very important.
very.
Trauma's hidden influence silently shapes our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships, often long before we realize its presence. How do unspoken trauma, especially childhood or generational trauma, show up in our everyday lives?
So the thing about what you termed as unspoken trauma. Um, so some people may have gone through traumatic experiences, let's say in their childhood, and they may not know that it would be deemed as trauma, depending upon their family unit where they grew up. They may have seen, as you mentioned earlier, they may have seen that as being normal, and so they could have encountered the trauma when they were 5, 10 years old, or maybe an adolescent, but I would say mostly a child. And then they reach the age of 30, 40, and they start to realize that there are things in their life that seem to be dysfunctioning, relationships, jobs, what have you. And then that's when that person begins to say, I need to take a look back. But that the professional who's working with them helps them to start taking a look back. You know, where did the trauma come from? Where did the behaviors come from? Because when people have certain behaviors, they just don't pop up. I mean, they come from somewhere. People act the way they do for a reason. They come from somewhere. It's just that sometimes with trauma can be so buried, so deep, that it may have happened to you as a child, but you may not realize it until you become an adult.
So some people, I guess they're in denial. What role does denial play in preventing us from addressing the cracks beneath our surface, pun intended?
Well, denial plays a very big part in it, because especially if you have loved ones, family, friends, relationships, um, where people are telling you and you're hearing the same thing from different people. It's always the same kind of behavior that you're putting out, the same kinds of responses you're hearing that from people. And if you just at a point where you just don't, you're denying what people are saying, but everybody's saying it. Um, that's going to prove to be very problematic, because you're not getting to the core of the problem. When you have to sit down with yourself and do some introspection. Most people that come to me, for therapy, they don't necessarily know what's wrong. They just know that there's something wrong. They don't know what's wrong, and that's what I'm there for, to help. So we can help. I can help you figure out what's wrong, but they know something is wrong, probably because they're friends. They've had lots of boyfriends or husbands or wives or what have you. People have been telling them the same thing. And so now this person says, I can never do well in relationships. But in every partner I've been with, they're all saying the same thing. So I'm here today because I need to figure out what is actually going on with me, because everybody's saying the same thing.
Stories and humanity are intertwined, as the tales we tell reveal the depths of our shared struggles, triumphs, and dreams. Without naming any names, could you share a story that illustrates either the cost of silence or the power of speaking up?
Oh, wow. So the cost of silence. Okay, so I'll speak to that. The cost of silence. I'll use the African diaspora, our culture as a whole, when we talk about the cost of silence. Though I understand the why we have been silent, I'll give you a prime example. Um, our guests that are on with us tonight, sure, I'm sure that everybody, if they had microphones and could speak, we all could finish this sentence if I started it, and if I said, "How many of you know how to finish this sentence? What goes on in this house?" Everybody could probably answer that question. They could probably put it in the chat. Everybody here is going to say, "What goes on in this house stays in this house." So, as a culture, the African diaspora, we are infamous for that, for keeping things silent. Though I understand our reason behind why uh, we have kept so much silence. Unfortunately, down through the generations, our silence has cost us a lot because we are now seeing that there is a lot of hidden trauma that we as a diaspora has experienced, and now we're seeing our great grandchildren, the results of it, uh, our grandchildren, what have you, some of the results of it. So silence always costs us something. It always costs us something, which is why we do have to, and I don't mean this in a way that we have to expose people per se, though, if that's what you need to do in order to get free, but we do need to talk about what is happening with us as an individual. So
You know,
that's a prime example about the cost of silence.
you're so right because you mentioned a statement I've heard over and over again. What happens in this house, and it just brought me back to my first book that I wrote in my mother's house. And when that book came out, many have said, "What happens in this house stays in the house. You should have never wrote the book." But it freed me.
Mhm.
I it wasn't about telling on anyone else or saying anything about anyone. It was never put out that way. Many may have taken it that way, but it wasn't. It was what happens in this house, what happens in the house to me, what was going on with me. I want it, and it wasn't meant for it to be public. To tell you the truth, it was initially meant for it to be for my children and my grandchildren. At the time, I didn't have any, but I wanted it to be a part of my legacy, and I just wanted them to know who I was and what was going on in my life. Hopefully that if things like that were happening, because things are generational, to them or around them, they would understand where it came from, and they would understand that it's okay to get help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay. When I say expose yourself, I'm not talking about indecent exposure. There's indecent exposure, and then there is indecent exposure. And some of the things that I revealed was inappropriately indecent. So what happened in my mother's house, I decided to share, and I decided to free myself with that. So others may not feel as though that what happens in the house should stay in the house. But think about it this way. I don't like using the word, so I'll just say the letter. Sometimes children are told that what happens in this house stays in this house, and they don't want to mention that they were, I would say, instead of the R word, that they were tampered with. So it's hard to tell your child what happens in this house stays in the house. There's certain things that do need to come out, because if they don't, then they stay silent. And I'm a product of that. I stayed silent for over 40 years. Some people may say, well, why did you just say something now? Why did you say something then? Embedded in my head was what happens in this house stays in this house. So, for all the little girls and little boys out there, it's okay, to reveal what you need to reveal if it's going to free you. And that I wish I would have, I guess I would say, taught myself that, but I had to go through a journey in order to get myself to be right, to be able to say it was okay for me to be okay. And taking steps towards healing begins with acknowledging the pain, embracing self compassion, and choosing growth one moment at a time. For someone listening tonight who realizes they've been silent about their struggles, what's the very first step they can take?
Well, and again, I want to say I applaud you for writing that book. But the very first step that they can take, which is the first step that any of us take if we're seeking out any kind of professional help, is to identify that there are problems. Identify that and not identify that and not try to stay silent to yourself. You're the first person that you need to speak to. So that I would say that would be the initial thing. It's you're the first person that you need to speak to, because oftentimes what hinders us or disallows us from speaking is because we're listening to the voices of others, which those voices are very, very strong. So I would say the first step is to speak to yourself, have that conversation with yourself. And if there's something wrong, if you tell yourself there is something wrong, I may not know what that is, I may not know what that something is, but there is something wrong. And I would say journaling is a very powerful thing. You know, perhaps you want to journal, write your thoughts down, write down what has happened to you. That may be another powerful things, but those would be, I would say, the very first two things. And if you have a trusted person in your life that you feel comfortable, it may not be a therapist at that point, but if you have a trusted person, that trusted person could be your husband. You know, let's say, for instance, you're married to an individual and you start to notice certain behaviors with that individual, and that individual now begins to want to disclose, you know, things that happened to them in their childhood or something like that. So I would certainly say, you know, having a trusted individual, sister, friend, brother, a trusted individual, pastor, or something like that, who may in turn say, "Hey, I'm here for you to support you, but I do think that you need to seek out some professional help."
So those are some practical tools, habits, or even daily shifts that Dr. Stevens had recommended, and that starts the journey towards a better mental health. And it's no shame in that, and admitting even to yourself that, you know, I need help. I need help. You need help with directions. You need help with crossword puzzles. You need help if you, and I say it this way, and I say it to many people. If you had a headache, you would take medication because that helps that portion of your mental health, because that is a part of your mental health. So to acknowledge that, there's no shame in it at all.
No.
Tonight, Dr. Stevens helped us understand that mental health isn't a weakness. It's a part of our overall well-being. And silence, while it may feel safe, doesn't protect us. It isolates us. So this week, I encourage you to ask yourself, where in my life have I been silent about my pain? Dr. Stevens, before we wrap up, could you please share with our viewers and listeners how they can connect with you, whether it's through your website, social media, platform, or upcoming events, so they can continue to benefit from the powerful work you're doing?
Sure. So you can reach out to me and connect with me via my website, which is no dot, just drcarolynstevens.com. Send me a message there. You can also find me on social media on Facebook under Dr. Carolyn Stephens. I have a therapy page there where I offer different coping strategies, different wellness tips. You can offer that. Next month, I will be on the Dope Living podcast with a segment called Mind Matters, where I'll be talking to the community about mental health and wellness. And so join me on Facebook, look out for that. Join me on Facebook with that. But certainly, by all means, you can reach out to me via my website. Again, it's drcarolynstevens.com.
I'm hoping you guys who've watched this have taken it all in. And if you have not been able to catch it all, just watch us on the replay and you can get all the information there. At this time, I usually just close out, but I'm going to invite you all to join us on Friday, September the 19th. I won't be here doing a live show, but what I will have up is a slideshow. It's actually a memorial honoring my beloved son Cordell, who passed away last Saturday. So
Mhm.
I won't be available to you all, but I will be back. So I would like for you to join us on October the 3rd for part two, where Dr. Stevens will guide us to exploring trauma, resilience, and the heavy burden so many of us carry. Because awareness is only the beginning. True healing requires action. And as always, thanks for keeping it basic. So good night and enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Good night.